like Theodore McCarrick or Cardinal Wuerl or those kind of guys. I mean,
or the Pope.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm
Benedict.
Not Benny. Well, he was covering up, but so is the guy now.
Is he really?
Well, yeah. It's not great.
I thought he was like the more progressive Pope.
Oh, he's very progressive, yes.
But he's covering up for stuff as well. Well, they all are. I mean, it's a dark institution in a lot of ways because it's history. You know.
Well, the institution, it was instituted by Christ, but that doesn't mean that it can't be flawed. And there's a school of thought that says it isn't what it purports to be anymore. It's moved away from what it was intended to be and what it is. Almost, there's a guy called Bishop Vigano who says it's a counterfeit parallel church, and it's running an entirely different religion. I actually don't adhere to a post-conciliar church. I adhere.
Can you define what that means?
Okay. There was an event that happened in the 60s. First, there was an event in the Vatican where they elected John the 23rd Pope, right, in 1958. I was 2 years old, right? He was elected, and it was a very funny thing that happened in the conclave. Usually there's white and black smoke that goes out of the chimneys to tell you, we have a pope, habemus papam, and the white smoke came out. And everybody cheered, and they went crazy. And then about a half an hour later, black smoke came out. That never in history has that happened, that the white smoke came out, and then the black smoke came out.
White smoke means we found a new pope. Black smoke means no pope.
That's right. They'd have.
Well, thank you, Mel Gibson, for that introduction to the topic of the 1958 conclave. For those who want more information, I'm going to show you the smoke signal that he is referring to. I don't think he's exactly right saying there's never been a mix. There's been a puff of white smoke and then black smoke, but there's never been a clear, unambiguous signal like you're going to see in this video signaling that a pope has been elected that was wrong. Some of the effects that you're about to see in the video are not genuine. I did that to recreate the event, but the signal that you're seeing from the Sistine Chapel and the crowd that you see in St. Peter's Square is footage that I obtained from France about 15 years ago.
Lo vedete, è stato eletto il Papa al quinto scrutinio, alla quinta votazione. Ecco il pomignolo sulla Cappella Sistina.
So what was the scenario?
That somebody was elected and that maybe something else happened and he was pushed aside and someone else was put in. So it was
power struggle.
It's safe to assume that Mel Gibson knows a little more about what happened inside the conclave in 1958 than he's telling Joe Rogan. The man you see on the screen is Father Jean-Marie Charles-Roux. He was the chaplain on the set of the film The Passion of the Christ, and I can only assume that he knows Mel Gibson very well. He was a former Vatican intelligence official, and in 1993 he gave the following testimony. The aged priest claimed that Joseph Cardinal Siri of Genoa had been elected and also accepted the papal office, but was then immediately shoved aside without his actually abdicating. According to Father Charles-Roux, a very serious threat was delivered to Siri and the assembled cardinals through Cardinal Tisserand, the Dean of the Sacred College of Cardinals, shortly after the acceptance of office by the new Pope. Conclave ministers had already begun to burn the ballots with dry straw in the Sistine Chapel, sending up white smoke to announce the election of the Pope. Even as the thunderous cheers of the crowd outside could be heard by those inside the conclave, a group of cardinals, in league with Tisserand, commanded the ministers to change the mixture in the stove to wet straw, in order to produce black smoke. When the conclave officials refused, the order to send out a false signal that would indicate no electoral results, the group of cardinals brushed the monsignors aside and began to dump wet straw into the stove. Thereafter, a shoving match ensued over control of the stove, and the alternating mixtures of dry and wet straw that were being put into it caused the smoke to vary from white to black to white and finally to gray. Now, I don't know Father Jean-Marie Charles-Roux. I wasn't there in 1993 when he gave this testimony, but of all the different testimonies that have been given, his sounds the most legitimate. And if I look, I've got a newspaper here from the following day, and you'll see that the timestamps, I'm going to show you some timestamps on here, and you can see for yourself how well that they line up with what he said 35 years after this event happened. So this is the Daily Mail. It's not the full page of the newspaper, but what I want to point out is the telegrams were coming in as the events unfolded. 5.5 was 5:05 in England, which was 6:05 in Rome. And you can see, we'll scroll down and we'll go through them one by one. The first one was at 5:05, and it says, white smoke was sighted coming from a chimney of the Sistine Chapel. Okay, this is after Cardinal Siri has been elected and accepted the position, and the monsignors at the stove began to burn the dry straw with the ballots to give a white signal. 3 minutes later, at 5:08 or 6:08 Rome time, great billowing of white clouds of smoke settled all doubt. The Pope was elected. So the initial signal, which was a normal signal, has now turned into a great billowing of white smoke. This would be when Cardinals Tisserand and the rebel cardinals moved on the men at the stove, tried to get them to change the signal, but instead of changing the signal, they dumped large amounts of dry straw into the stove, sending up an over-the-top white signal, which would be hard for them to say was a mistake or disavow. 10 minutes or 5 minutes at 5:10, a full 5 minutes after the white smoke was initially sighted, it says here, the smoke from the Vatican has shifted to black, indicating a pope may not have been elected. So now the rebel cardinals have assumed control of the stove and are dumping damp straw and creating a black signal. The smoke, because now there's there's wet and dry straw in the stove, so there's like a bunch of, it's just utter confusion. There's black, white, and gray coming out of the chimney. And then finally at 5:31, they conclude that, the Marshal of the Conclave approached the cardinals, which you're not supposed to do, but there was so much confusion, he went and confirmed, and they said there was no pope, but I think it's safe to assume there was a pope and he was shoved aside, especially with all the changes that in the church and all the troubles that ensued after this mysterious event. There's another newspaper that is significant. It's also from the day following the first day of the conclave where the white smoke was given. It's a major newspaper out of Rome, Il Messaggero. And on the second page of this article, it gives almost an exact testimony of the Vatican radio announcer. I'm going to go through just some of what he said. Okay. Vatican radio announcer says a white smoke, dense, voluminous, covers the roof of the Sistine Chapel. There can be no doubt a pope has been elected. Okay, he goes on to say, white, white, white. We can now pronounce that on October 26 at 6 p.m. 1958, we have a successor to Pope Pius XII. If you read the entire article and everything the radio announcer says, which I'm going to put in the video summary, the announcer became very emotional, and I think part of that was because of the massive amount of white straw that the men inside the Sistine Chapel dumped into the stove. In essence, when it went from a normal signal to an over-the-top white signal, I think it was actually a distress signal. The men at the stove were actually telling the world that the church was being taken over. It's unfortunately that it took 66 years to interpret that signal, but I believe that's what it was saying. And I think that this event, although it's not as dramatic as the Kennedy assassination, it is at least as significant, if not more significant, that the Vatican and the Catholic Church was taken over.